So I've had um the topic for tonight is I want to show you addiction is addiction is addiction. And if you know me, you know I don't usually use that word. um because addiction is a consequence or an outcome. It's not the actual problem. The root of addiction, numbing, or medicating, which is the term we use at the HC and at REC, is trauma. I'm surviving a trauma, which is why, hold on, there's kids playing in the cul-de-sac, and if I didn't put them outside, they'd be barking the whole time. So, a concept that is very confusing, and in my judgment, it's because it's very misguided. It's getting better now, but it's very misguided, is that addiction, numbing, medicating is bad, wrong, deviant. All of the pathological thinking around if they really loved me, they'd stop. If it was really important to them, they wouldn't do that. I do understand that when I talk about this topic, it can be confusing and it can be triggering, depending on where people are in their recovery process. Because the intention of healing is that I take responsibility for my wounding, even though I didn't cause it. And I don't know about you guys, but in my own personal journey, that pissed me off for several years. I was very much in blaming and faulting. And so there is no judgment if that is where you are. And if you don't identify with what I'm going to talk about tonight, that's not bad or wrong. I just want to invite you to consider what I'm sharing. My qualifier for this is not just because I'm a recovering codependent. It is also the 15 plus years I've been working in codependency. And a lot of what I'm going to share, a lot of therapists don't even understand. So it very much is an expertise. It very much is a specialty. Codependency is seen as the world by people pleasing. It is so much more than that. And I'm going to use synonyms that will support understanding that concept of codependency, because my veterans or fellow travelers in the room here know I've been doing this for over 4 years now, and I haven't run out of topics yet. So understanding codependency is this massive umbrella. It's this massive process, and there's lots of things underneath it that we'll talk about. But tonight, what I wanted to share is why codependency is also pathological. It's very confusing for people because my industry does not identify codependency as a diagnosis. That is very scary for me to admit out loud. And it doesn't matter how many of us fight about that. It's not identified as a diagnosis. And I'm going to talk about it tonight as if it is. So the theme or the overarching relationship that I want to support tonight, and recognizing that there's not a hierarchy around pain. If I'm addicted to pills, if I'm addicted to alcohol, if I'm addicted to work, if I'm addicted to sex, if I'm addicted to people pleasing or a loved one, known as codependency, all of those subtypes have different symptomology, meaning one has a beer can in their hand, one has pills in their hand, one gets praised because they do amazing work. One holds a lot of secrets and shame because it's around sex and porn. But the brain science around what the addiction is to is all the same. And that's scary. It is scary if you are in a situation where, sorry guys, I need to pause for a second because my dogs are running around in the cul-de-sac and they're not supposed to be out there. So my husband can go get them. Okay. If someone, and they did, tried to tell me that when my husband and my dad were in active addiction, that I was as sick as they were, it would have pissed me off. And I've been like, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm the only thing keeping him alive. I truly believe that, especially with my dad. When we look at behaviors, which is what I want to point out tonight, I'm going to list behaviors, and then I'm going to show you in one type, it really applies to all of them, but whether you're looking at drugs or alcohol or sex or porn, I want to show you how the list of behaviors are the same, whether it's a substance use disorder, a process addiction, which is codependency, food, sex, work. It doesn't matter which one you're looking at, the behaviors are the same. I don't know about you. The first about 10 times I heard this, I rejected it completely because it meant that I was just like my dad. And I was growing up in a world where I said, I will never drink because I thought the alcohol was the problem. No one ever taught me different. And back then, 18 years ago last month, this didn't exist. What we have today, this research and these resources did not exist. So when you think about characteristics, behaviors, I'm going to say a few, and feel free to take notes if you want. And no, I'm recording this. I'll cut out the gaps in it, but I'm recording this so you can watch it again if you want to, or if you want someone else to hear it with you. But I want to point out what I consider the top ones that when I work with a client and I show them this, they get real pissed, and they have a right to. Dishonesty. Dishonesty. Justifying. Rationalizing. Anxiety, fear, paranoia. Obsessive and compulsive. Chasing. Shame. Now, I want to invite you to just consider when you think of these behaviors in someone of active addiction. I am going to use extreme examples because it makes it easier. And at the end, if you have questions about other ones, you just ask me and I'll let you know. But when I am in active addiction with substances, dishonesty will show up like acting out. I'll lie. I'll say I'm going to so-and-so's house, and all of a sudden on one of those fancy ass app things on my phone, you can see that I'm not at so-and-so's house. I don't know what that thing's called, but the follower app thing. I, in my body, pathologically, will justify and rationalize. She won't understand. He won't get it. They'll just judge me. I'm going to be dishonest about most of the things I'm doing, even when it's not even about use or chasing, because I need to be able to have the ability to chase what I need to chase. Or you might call that control. In active addiction of substances, dishonesty, justifying and rationalizing creates this need for more because one's never enough. And in the chasing of the next high, which is what my brain tells me to do, there's no prefrontal cortex happening right now. Analyzing, decision, logic, prefrontal cortex is off in active addiction, which is why there is a direct correlation with active addiction and criminal behavior. Let me say that again. There's a direct correlation with criminal behavior and active addiction. What does that mean? That means when I'm actively using, I would do things I would never do if I wasn't using. It would be out of character for me. The anxiety, fear, and paranoia start to develop because my life becomes more and more about one more. It becomes more and more because my brain needs more to function. If I don't get another one, I'm going to go through withdrawals at work tomorrow. If I don't get more, I won't be able to sleep tonight. The fear and the paranoia continue to increase in intensity and severity. That creates a relationship with obsessive and compulsive behaviors. I'm going to start having structure around where I can get money and how I can get away with it. I'm going to start obsessing over where am I going to get my next one. The compulsion is the act. The obsession is the rumination. And all of those things create this cycle of shame, which I cannot get out of as a human, not because I'm Amber. I cannot get out of as a human. Why? Because the prefrontal cortex that tells me none of this is in character for me isn't even on. She's not even driving the bus. So looking at those behaviors, they're pretty typical of maybe even if it's been your experience of a loved one, if it's been your own experience, if it's been something you've seen on TV, it's pretty characteristic of what a chase looks like. Severity depends on what the substance is, right? Some are sicker than others. Things like meth, street drugs happen very quickly, right? Whereas alcohol can have a slower, more insidious increase. Now, I want to point out to you that brain is no different than my codependent brain thinking I can keep him alive. Because the dishonesty, remember that one? That was the first one, happens when I start to say to myself, it's really not that bad. He'll be okay. He's just having a hard time right now because he got in a fight with his boss, or him and his mom aren't getting along. I'm being dishonest to myself. And in turn, I then start being dishonest to other people. I start making things up because they wouldn't understand, justifying, rationalizing. I start at one point, it was okay for him to use because, maybe it did help him sleep. And maybe he was nicer to the kids when he slept. Boy, did that make a big difference for the whole family. Rationalizing, justifying. The dishonesty and the rationalizing and the justifying starts to create the enabling behavior. It is not my intention to enable. I'm only trying to survive myself. But because his behavior, and I don't mean to classify this as female or male, I'm just using my own story. His behavior starts continuing to increase in intensity and severity. There's this insidious process, just like diabetes that's untreated. It's pathological, and the longer it lasts, the worse it gets. So guess what? The longer he's sick, the worse I get. the more lies I tell. I get so caught up in all the rationalizing and justifying, I don't even fucking know why I'm okay with it anymore. I just know I'm up to here and I'm surviving, and I don't even know how I got here. What the hell happened? We were a great married couple 6 years ago. How did we get here? Then comes the chasing, because now his behaviors are getting dangerous. Now I'm worried that he might hurt someone else on accident, but it wouldn't be on accident because he's drinking. The chase becomes me waking up when he's on second shift so I can drive him to work. The chase becomes me getting ahead of his consequences to try to control any dangerous outcomes. My chase is about him. He is what I'm chasing. But because I'm surviving and because I'm so externally located, trying to control something I'm completely powerless over, I can't see the forest for the trees. Anxiety, fear, and paranoia. This increases the more consequences he gets, because it is a extension of me. We can't go to church with him hungover. What will they think? We have to look like the happy little successful family when we go to the PTO meeting or to the country club to play golf. People can't know. I become paranoid that everyone's going to figure it out. So I start hiding more. I start keeping more secrets. My obsessive and compulsive behaviors circle around controlling his behaviors. I am now obsessed with, how do I keep this secret a secret? My compulsion, my fear and paranoia is, why is he yawning? It must be because he's high. And maybe he's not, he's just tired. But my compulsion, my obsessing, is the assumption that he's always drunk or he's always high. And he can't do anything right at this point, which informs shame. How I treat him is, I'm going to turn this way because I don't even want to project this onto you guys, especially if it's part of your story. I'm going to project on him all the shame that I'm feeling. You can't do anything. If you loved me, you would stop. What is your problem? All the shame I feel because of my powerlessness, I then project onto my loved one. Now, notice none of that I said anything about being right or wrong, right? All I'm pointing out is that I gave you a list of behaviors and characteristics, and I just applied them to substance use disorder and codependency. Codependency is a process addiction. It's the same as food, work, sex, and people. It's the same behaviors. But because ours don't look as destructive as a codependent, because mine don't look as overt, aren't stigmatized and judged as strongly because I don't have a beer in my hand or a brown paper bag, I'm the better one. Please hear me say, wherever you are in your process, I've been doing work for 18 years, and I have not been in this place for 18 years. And the science is what helps me inform me of what my addiction is. Because I can tell you right now, it is pathological that from the time I was probably 8, I thought I was keeping him alive. That's pathological. Even at 24, when he died from his addictions, self-inflicted, I thought I was at fault because I wasn't there that night. That's pathological. I have no power and control of when someone is done in their human journey. I don't get to control that. I was addicted to the chase of keeping him alive because my codependency tells me I know better. I know what you need. I know how you should be feeling. I know what you should be working on in therapy. I believed this shit and I lived it for a really long time. But what I never realized, because I really believe there was just misguidance, is what kept me stuck was that I stayed in that role. I couldn't forgive him either because I couldn't even get to the place to recognize that he was traumatized. In my story with my dad, my addiction was codependency, and I was sick. I was sick. I would not go to nursing class to go to college because I would know what he did the night before. So I would fake sick to stay home. That's pathological. That I felt I had some type of control or power over someone else or someone else's addiction. Take a deep breath with me. The intention of using numbing and medicating is to numb the pain of trauma. My trauma happened to be witnessing my dad not loving himself my whole life and self-destructing in front of me. That was my trauma. So me trying to control him, control his addiction, was my addiction. And the sicker he got, the sicker I got. And I stayed sick as long as my focus was outside my body. As long as I was externally focused and I believed I had some type of control over that shit, I was sick. And it wasn't until I learned how to get in my body. It wasn't until I learned what we've talked about with grounding. Nobody fucking taught me how to do that. How do I know I'm grounded? Am I in there or is my body outside? Fuck, I didn't know. And what we know today is the way that I heal is by getting back in and healing from within, using an internal locus of control, recognizing when my body says, this is too much, I need to back off. That barometer did not exist as long as I'm in an external locus of control. It doesn't exist. I have no barometer. And it also explains why, if you're like me, it took me a few years before I could get back in my body. It wasn't safe in there. It was painful. And finding an experiential healer like myself, like my team now, because they would go with me. Healing from codependency is no different than healing from any other addiction. And I know I piss people off when I say that. And it comes from a place of knowing, of experience, but it also comes from a place of healing, of looking from a place of ownership, what I did that was all well-intentioned, all the right things for the wrong reasons.